inflation, the 2022 federal minimum wage has, in the United States, is worth 40% less than what it was in 1970. Let me reiterate that. Today, the minimum wage is worth 40% less than what it was 50 years ago. Now, here you can see how in 1970, this is what the actual buying power of the dollar had, $12. Now you can see that it's fallen to 7.50 to be exact, for today. So what this means is that despite the rising cost of commodities as well as basic necessities, the minimum wage for the everyday American has not kept up the same pace. Now, I strongly believe that we should raise the minimum wage in order to provide a livable wage as well as lift many Americans out of poverty. I personally have seen the effects of the minimum wage as I work a minimum wage job in the fast food industry. And I believe that you can benefit from listening to this speech because 62% of the American workforce in the 16 to 24 age range is working a minimum wage job, which I believe includes people in this room. Now, the main ideas I will cover today are: 1, why the stagnant minimum wages are a problem; 2, the attempted solutions and the subsequent failure of those solutions; and 3, my proposed solution that would fix the problem. Now that I briefly previewed what I'll cover today, let's get right into the first point. So, stagnant minimum wages are a growing problem in the United States because they increase the population of those in poverty, as well as increase taxes in order to fund government programs to assist people. Stagnant wages have led to an increase in Americans living in poverty. In an online article titled Politics of Poverty 2021, it is stated that the bump from $290 a week to $600 a week would lift millions of families out of poverty. More than a quarter of the workforce, 40 million workers, would see a raise in wages. What this tells us is that currently there are millions of people not sitting around doing nothing, but instead working towards earning enough to meet their basic needs, and yet the wage they earn makes even something necessary a difficult task. In addition, the stagnant wages of today have resulted in an increase of taxes in order to fund the government assistance programs. In an article from the Economic Policy Institute 2016, they touch on this very topic by writing, however, many workers in certain sectors, wages are so low that even those who work full-time must rely heavily on government assistance to make ends meet. This means that as corporations are seeing an increase in profits, they are handing off their financial responsibility of their workers to the common taxpayers in their country. And now that I've told you a bit about the problem, let's look at what solutions have been attempted. The first attempt to solve the problem was when the minimum wage was last increased to $7.25 by the federal government. The second attempt to solve the problem was to let the states decide for themselves what the minimum wage should be. The first solution that the US implemented was to raise the federal minimum wage to $7.25. In an article from CNBC, they explained how the federal minimum wage is not enough by saying, the current minimum wage doesn't cover the cost of living for full-time workers in any US state. This shows how the solution provided by the government is not enough. It is as ineffective as putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. The second ineffective solution was to let the states decide for themselves what the minimum wage should be. Another article I found online from AmericanProgress.org stated in 2021, more than half of all workers who earned at or below the federal minimum wage lived in the South. Now, this shows how leaving the decision to the states will only cause disparity and leave the people in those states to fend for themselves without government protection. Now that I've talked about some ineffective solutions, I'll tell you what will actually cause results. All other solutions have clearly been ineffective. The problem of stagnant minimum wages can be solved by increasing the federal minimum wage to at least $21. This solution would work because as it stands today, raising the minimum wage to $21 would actually have an effect on the population living in poverty, unlike the $7.25 that is currently the minimum wage. In an online article from CEPR, they discussed inflation and the minimum wage by saying, however, if minimum wage did rise, if the minimum wage did rise in step with productivity growth since 1968, it would be almost $21.5 an hour today. This means that if we as a country were to show that we care about providing a livable wage to all workers, then the number should be about $21. The second reason why my solution would work is that because it is federally mandated, all the states would have to raise the minimum wage, which eliminates disparity. And as you can see, this is the disparity between all of the different states in this country. The fact is there is a disparity of wages in the US, especially in the South. However, this will be fixed by taking the decision away from the states and establishing a minimum wage that will benefit workers countrywide. In conclusion, I mentioned that I strongly believe we should raise the minimum wage in the US in order to provide a livable wage and lift many Americans out of poverty. Throughout this speech, I explained three things. I explained why stagnant minimum wages are a problem. Next, I talked about the attempted solutions and their subsequent failures. And lastly, I proposed my own solution to the problem. Think back to the statistic I provided in the beginning of my speech, and recall how the minimum wage today is worth 40% less than what it was 50 years ago. It becomes a clear explanation of why the economic gap in this country is continually growing and keeping a big population in our country in constant struggle. This situation can be improved, but it starts with you and doing whatever you can to increase the minimum wage, which means voting and making that change happen. Thank you for listening.